They say healers are born knowing the weight of life in their hands, but no one tells you about the weight of failure that crushes your bones long after the healing stops. That's how Lyra's story begins. The day the palace guards dragged her from the healer's district was the day she learned that some wounds run deeper than flesh and bone. Growing up, she'd believed the ancient texts that spoke of Omega healers as blessed beings, their gentle energy capable of mending what alphas destroyed with their strength. She'd clung to the foolish notion that her gift meant something, that perhaps one day she'd prove that even the lowest Omega could make a difference, that the scar across her throat, the mark of her shame, would fade into memory. But hope was a luxury she could no longer afford, as it turned out, because when you fail to save the one person who matters most, you don't just lose your reputation, you lose the very essence of what makes you a healer. And sometimes, the universe has a cruel sense of humor about second chances. The acrid smell of burning herbs filled the cramped healing ward as Lyra ground feverfew root with practiced precision. 3 years had passed since her banishment from the capital. 3 years of tending to miners and factory workers in the outer districts where no respectable healer would venture. "Another one's coming in," Mira announced from the doorway, her elderly face creased with concern. "Wolf fight. Bad one." Lyra didn't look up from her mortar. "Send him to the Alpha Clinic on 3rd Street. They don't want Omega healers touching their kind." "Can't. He's dying." The pestle stilled in Lyra's hands. Through the thin walls, she could hear it now, the labored breathing, the barely suppressed growls of an alpha in agony. Her instinct screamed at her to help, even as her scarred throat tightened with remembered pain. "Please, Lyra, just look at him." Against her better judgment, Lyra followed Mira to the front room. What she saw made her freeze. The alpha sprawled across her treatment table was massive, even by alpha standards. Blood seeped through makeshift bandages wrapped around his torso, and deep claw marks raked from his shoulder to his hip. But it wasn't the wounds that made her heart stutter, it was the corruption spreading beneath his skin like black veins. "Shadow poison," she breathed. "Can you help him?" A beta male stepped forward, desperation clear in his voice. "We've tried everything. Every healer in the district turned us away when they saw he's been cursed." Lyra finished. She approached slowly, her healer's senses already cataloging the damage. "This isn't from a normal fight. These are marks from a shadow alpha." The beta's face paled. "The border skirmish 3 days ago. He saved his unit. But shadow alpha wounds don't heal," Lyra said flatly. "Not with traditional methods. Not with alpha healers who rely on brute force to mend tissue." She circled the table, noting how the corruption pulsed with each labored breath. "He'll be dead by dawn." "Then you'll help?" Hope flickered in the beta's eyes. Lyra almost laughed. "I'm nobody!" A disgraced Omega healer who couldn't even. She cut herself off, hand unconsciously moving to her scarred throat. "Find someone else. There is no one else." The beta grabbed her arm, desperation overriding protocol. "Please, he's not just any alpha. He's—" A low growl cut through the air. The wounded alpha's eyes had opened, revealing irises of deep amber shot through with gold. Even corrupted and dying, his presence filled the room like smoke. "Let her go," he rasped, each word clearly costing him. The beta immediately released Lyra's arm. "Commander, save your strength." "Commander?" Lyra's blood ran cold. She looked closer at the wounded alpha, taking in the military insignia barely visible beneath the blood. "This is Commander Thorn Blackwood?" Even in the outer districts, everyone knew that name. The Iron Wolf. The alpha who'd held the northern border for 5 years. The same alpha who'd signed the decree limiting Omega healers to the slums after. The same Commander Blackwood who voted to uphold my banishment. Lyra's voice was steady, despite the tremor in her hands. How poetic. Thorn's eyes found hers, and even through the haze of pain, she saw recognition flicker. "The palace, healer," he managed. Former palace healer, she corrected coldly. The one your council deemed too dangerous after my failure, too emotional, too omega. She turned to leave. Find an alpha healer. Oh, wait. They've all failed, haven't they? Because alpha healing is about dominance, and you can't dominate death. Please, the beta pleaded. Whatever happened before, I can fix this. The words surprised everyone, including Lyra herself. She stood at the doorway, not turning back. Silence. Then, impossibly, a laugh rough and pained, but unmistakably mocking. The disgraced Omega thinks she can succeed where alphas failed? Lyra turned then, her gray eyes meeting his amber ones. I said I can fix this. I didn't say you'd like how. The beta, who'd introduced himself as Marcus, paced outside the treatment room like a caged animal. Lyra had banished him after his hovering made her hands shake. Now, alone with the dying commander, she could work properly. This will hurt, she warned, pulling supplies from her cabinets. Shadow poison feeds on alpha pride. To extract it, I need to… Just do it, Thorn growled. Though his eyes tracked her every movement with predatory focus, despite his weakness, Lyra approached with a bowl of moonwater, illegal in the capital but common in the outer districts. As she began cleaning his wounds, Thorn's entire body went rigid. What is that? He demanded through gritted teeth. Something your precious alpha healers would never lower themselves to use. She didn't gentle her touch as she worked. Omega healing isn't about overpowering injury. It's about understanding it, coaxing it to leave. Her fingers traced the edge of the corruption. But you have to let me in. Let you. His words cut off in a sharp inhale as she pressed her palm against the worst of the poison. Your alpha barriers. They're fighting me. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Lower them or die. Your choice. I don't. Lower barriers. For anyone. Then you'll be dead by midnight instead of dawn. Congratulations on your stubbornness. She moved to pull away, but his hand shot out, catching her wrist. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through them both. Wait. The words seemed dragged from him. Tell me why you're really doing this. Lyra stared at where his fingers circled her wrist, even weakened. His grip was firm but not painful. Maybe I enjoy the irony. The great Commander Blackwood, reduced to begging help from a worthless Omega. You're not worthless. The quiet words made her freeze. You voted to banish me. I voted to follow protocol. His breathing grew more labored. After the Queen. Don't. Lyra yanked her hand free. Don't you dare speak of that night. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Thorn closed his eyes. Do what you must. It was as close to permission as she'd get. Lyra placed both hands on his chest, feeling the resistance of his alpha nature. Most healers would try to break through with force. She did the opposite, letting her energy flow around his barriers like water around stone. What are you? He gasped, as she found a crack in his defenses. Shh! She concentrated, following the poison's path. This is why Omega healers were feared, you know. We don't fight. We seduce. His eyes snapped open at that, but she was too focused to care about her word choice. The shadow poison writhed under her touch, trying to burrow deeper. She crooned to it, actually hummed a healing song her grandmother had taught her, before the academies had beaten such primitive methods out of her. To her amazement, Thorn's barriers began to lower. Not completely, but enough. That's it, she murmured. Let me help you. The extraction was excruciating. Thorn's body bowed off the table as she drew the poison up through his wounds. Black ichor seeped out, sizzling as it hit the moonwater blessed cloths. His roar of pain shook the walls, purely alpha in its rage. But he didn't pull away. Didn't strike out as she'd half expected. When the last of the poison cleared, Lyra stumbled back, exhausted. Thorn lay panting on the table, his wounds already beginning to close properly. How? He asked roughly. Trade secret. She turned away, washing her hands with shaking fingers. You'll need to stay for observation. The corruption could return if… Thank you. The sincere words made her pause. Don't thank me yet. You're not fully healed, and… She faced him, only to find his amber eyes locked on her with an intensity that stole her breath. I remember you, he said quietly, from before. You used to sing in the palace halls. Heat flooded her cheeks. That was a long time ago. 3 years. His gaze dropped to her scarred throat. I'm sorry. For what happened? For my part in it. Your part? Lyra laughed bitterly. You did your duty. Protected the kingdom from a dangerous Omega, who dared to… The door burst open. Marcus rushed in, followed by 2 other guards. Commander, the corruption is gone, Thorn said, not looking away from Lyra. Thanks to her. Dawn painted the sky purple as Lyra checked Thorn's wounds for the 3rd time. He'd insisted on staying despite her protests that he should return to whatever alpha-exclusive healing center he preferred. The scarring will be minimal, she muttered, trying to ignore how her fingers tingled where they touched his skin. Though, I can't promise. Why did you fail? The question hit like ice water. Excuse me? Thorn pushed himself up on his elbows, studying her with those unsettling amber eyes. With the Queen. Every report said you were the most gifted healer in generations. So why? Get out. Lyra stepped back, hands clenched. You're healed enough. Leave. I need to understand. No. You need to go back to your privileged life and forget this ever happened. She turned away, busying herself with cleaning instruments that didn't need cleaning. Forget that an Omega saved your life. Tell them an alpha healer. I won't lie. Wouldn't be the first time the council covered up an inconvenient truth. Strong fingers caught her chin, turning her to face him. The touch was gentle, but insistent. What aren't you telling me? This close, she could see flecks of gold in his eyes, smell the cedar and storm scent that marked him as alpha. Her Omega nature wanted to bare her throat, to submit. She fought the instinct viciously. The Queen was poisoned, she said flatly. Not shadow poison, something else. Something that specifically targets Omega healing abilities. She jerked free of his grip. I tried everything, sang until my throat bled, poured every ounce of power I had into her. But the poison was designed to turn healing into harm. The more I tried to save her, the faster she died. Thorn went very still. That's not in any report. Because admitting someone had created an anti-Omega weapon would have caused panic. Lyra touched her scarred throat. So they blamed me instead. The emotional Omega who lost control, who let feelings cloud judgment. The king himself… She stopped, unable to continue. The king gave you that scar? A reminder, she said quietly, of what happens when Omegas forget their place. Silence stretched between them. Then, Thorn rose from the table, his movements still stiff but determined. Before she could react, he dropped to one knee. What are you? Stand up! Lyra backed away, horrified. By the old laws, I owe you a life debt. His head remained bowed. Ask anything of me, and it's yours. I don't want. She stopped as understanding dawned. You're mocking me. His head snapped up. What? The great commander, kneeling to a disgraced Omega. How your soldiers would laugh. Tears burned her eyes. Is this payment for saving you? Humiliation? Lyra! Don't. She was shaking now. Don't pretend to honor old traditions when your kind spent decades destroying them. Life debts between alphas and omegas were outlawed precisely because they gave omegas power over alphas. Thorn rose slowly. I know. I'm offering anyway. Why? He moved closer, each step deliberate. Because you saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. Because you told me a truth that others would kill to keep hidden. Because, he paused, seeming to struggle with words. Because when you healed me, I felt something I've never experienced before. The moonwater can cause hallucinations, not hallucinations. He was close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Connection, like you reached past every barrier I've built and touched something I'd forgotten existed. Lyra's heart raced. That's just the healing bond. It fades. Does it? His hand rose, hovering near her scarred throat. May I? She should say no, should push him away. Instead, she found herself nodding. His fingers ghosted over the scar tissue with impossible gentleness. A shudder ran through her at the contact. I voted for your banishment, he said quietly. Because I was a coward. Because the way you made me feel when you sang in those palace halls terrified me more than any battle. Commander. Thorn. His thumb brushed her pulse point. Just Thorn. The door slammed open. Marcus stood there, face grave. Commander, we have a problem. The Shadow Alphas, they know someone survived their poison. They're coming. Lyra's mind raced. Shadow Alphas weren't just creatures, they were corrupted beings. Alphas transformed by darkness. And now they were hunting. The attack came at sunset. Lyra had been preparing evacuation supplies when the first howl split the air, a sound like breaking glass and dying stars that made every Omega in the district whimper in instinctive fear. Shadow Alphas don't venture into cities, Mira said, though her hands trembled as she packed medical supplies. They can't. The wards were built to keep out normal threats, Thorn finished grimly. He'd refused to leave despite Lyra's repeated demands, and now stood guard at the clinic's entrance like some ancient sentinel. Shadow Alphas are something else entirely. They're not just monsters, they're our own people, transformed. Through the window, Lyra could see them, 3 figures moving through the streets with unnatural grace, leaving frost and withered plants in their wake. Unlike normal werewolves, their forms seemed to shift and blur, never quite solid. She recognized the tragedy now. These had once been alphas like Thorn, before darkness claimed them. They're hunting, Marcus observed, his hand on his weapon. Looking for something specific. For him, Lyra glanced at Thorn. You carry their poison scent. They can track. No, Thorn's expression darkened. They're not hunting me. The lead Shadow Alpha stopped directly in front of the clinic. When it spoke, its voice was like autumn leaves over gravestones. Omega Healer. You have something that belongs to us. Lyra's blood ran cold. That's impossible. The poison is destroyed. Not the poison. The creature's form solidified slightly, revealing features that might have once been handsome before corruption took hold. The knowledge. You learned our secret when you healed him. That cannot be allowed. I don't understand. Shadow poison isn't just a weapon, Thorn said quietly. It's how they reproduce. They can't create more of their kind naturally, so they corrupt alphas, turn them into what I almost became. His jaw tightened. If you hadn't intervened, the Shadow Alpha laughed, a sound like breaking bones. She delayed the inevitable. The taint leaves traces. In time, you'll turn anyway. Unless what? Lyra stepped forward, ignoring Thorn's warning growl. Unless you come with us, healer. Learn to reverse what you've done. Your gift is unique. With it, we could perfect the transformation process, create shadow alphas without the messy business of near death. The creature tilted its head. Refuse, and we'll take this entire district, starting with your precious clinic. She's not going anywhere. Thorn snarled, moving to block Lyra from view. The failed guardian speaks. Another shadow alpha materialized from the growing darkness. Tell me, Commander, how does it feel knowing your queen died because you trusted an Omega's weakness over alpha strength? Lyra felt Thorn stiffen. Don't listen to them. We were there that night, the creature continued, watching, laughing. The poison was our creation, yes, but your arrogance made it possible, excluding Omega healers from your war councils, never asking why your enemies suddenly became so interested in biological warfare. You're lying, but Thorn's voice lacked conviction. The Queen begged for the Omega healer, didn't she? But protocol demanded an Alpha tend to royalty first. By the time they finally allowed Lyra to try, the Shadow Alpha's grin was all teeth. Well, we all know how that ended. Stop. Lyra's voice cut through the night. What do you really want? The lead shadow studied her. You're the first Omega in centuries to successfully extract our darkness. Your singing, yes. We heard it somehow harmonizes with the corruption's frequency. With proper training, you could become either our greatest asset or our biggest threat. Then you know my answer. Do I? The creature gestured lazily. More shadows moved in the streets, dozens of them. Your clinic treats over 100 patients. All those innocent Omegas and Betas. All that delicious suffering if you refuse. Mira gasped behind her. Through the windows, Lyra could see her patients, the pregnant Omega from the factories, the elderly Beta who brought her soup, the orphaned pups she'd been teaching basic healing. All of them trapped in their homes as shadows circled. A trade, then, Lyra said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. Me for their safety. Guarantee no harm comes to this district. And I'll... No. Thorn's roar shook the building. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. What they'll make you become. Someone has to pay for that night, Lyra said quietly. Maybe it should have always been me. The Shadow Alpha's grin widened. Wise choice, little healer. Come. We have much too. Thorn moved faster than lightning. One moment he stood beside Lyra. The next, his claws were at the Shadow Alpha's throat. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. Commander, no. Run, he ordered, not looking back. Now! The fight was brutal. Thorn moved like liquid death, every strike precise despite his still healing wounds. But for every Shadow Alpha he struck down, 2 more seemed to take its place. Lyra pressed against the clinic door, torn between fleeing and helping. I can't leave you. I said run! Thorn's voice held the full weight of Alpha command, making her Omega instincts scream to obey. But something stronger than biology kept her rooted. Pride, perhaps. Or stupidity. Or the memory of his fingers gentle against her scarred throat. When the 4th Shadow Alpha materialized behind Thorn, claws aimed at his exposed back, Lyra acted on instinct. The healing song tore from her throat knot, the gentle lullabies she'd used before, but something raw and primal that her grandmother had called the war cry of peace. The Shadow Alphas recoiled as if burned. Their semi-solid forms flickered, darkness writhing beneath their skin in response to her voice. Impossible, one hissed. That song was lost. Not lost. Lyra stepped into the street, power she'd suppressed for 3 years surging through her veins. Just forbidden, like everything else that gave Omega's strength. She sang louder, weaving healing and harm into a melody that made the very air shimmer. The Shadow Alphas' forms began to destabilize, their stolen alpha strength turning against them. But the lead creature laughed. Impressive, little healer. But you forget we've been preparing for you. It pulled out a vial of sickly green liquid, the same color as the poison that had killed the queen. 1 drop, it taunted, and your healing becomes death again. Shall we see how many you can kill this time? Your alpha protector, perhaps? Or maybe the old woman cowering inside? Lyra's voice faltered. The Shadow Alphas pressed forward. Sing, Thorn commanded, suddenly beside her. Blood ran down his arms, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. I believe in you. But the poison, I believe in you. His hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her smaller ones. I won't let you fall. Not again. The contact sent electricity through her entire system. Where their skin touched, she felt his strength, his certainty, his faith. He had faith in her, Lyra sang. This time, Thorn's energy joined hers, his alpha power not overwhelming but supporting, creating a foundation for her omega gifts to soar. The song changed, became something neither fully omega nor alpha but balanced between them. The shadow alphas screamed. Their forms didn't just destabilize, they began to purify. The darkness peeled away like old paint, revealing the alphas they'd once been underneath. No! The lead creature threw the vial, but Thorn caught it mid-air, crushing it in his fist. The poison hissed against his skin, trying to burrow in, but Lyra's song held it at bay. One by one, the shadow alphas collapsed, their true forms restored but unconscious. Only the leader remained standing, though barely. "This isn't over," it gasped, features flickering between corrupted and clean. "The source, the one who created us. They'll come for you both now." "Who?" Thorn demanded. "Who's behind this?" But the creature collapsed before answering, its body finally choosing humanity over corruption. Silence fell over the district. Then, slowly, doors opened. Omegas and betas emerged, staring in awe at the unconscious but human alphas littering the street. "You saved them," Mira breathed. "Saved us all. We saved them," Lyra corrected, looking at where her hand still clasped Thorn's. Together. She tried to pull away, but he held firm. "That song," he said quietly, "I've never heard anything like it. It's forbidden for a reason." When alphas and omegas combine their gifts, she trailed off, suddenly aware of how many people were watching. "It makes us stronger," Thorn finished. "Makes us whole." "Commander?" Marcus approached carefully. "The council will want answers. This kind of display will change everything," Thorn said firmly. He finally released Lyra's hand, but only to cup her face gently. "You're coming with me. To the capital. I'm banished." "Not anymore." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Someone orchestrated the Queen's death. Someone who knew exactly how to turn Omega healing into a weapon. We're going to find them." "We?" Lyra's heart raced. "Partners," he confirmed. "No more shadows between us." Around them, the district began to celebrate, but Lyra only had eyes for the alpha who'd chosen faith over fear. "Partners?" she agreed. The capital hadn't changed much in 3 years, but Lyra had. Where once she'd hunched her shoulders and kept her eyes down, now she walked with quiet confidence through the palace halls. It helped having Thorn beside her, his presence a shield against the whispers that followed their passage. "The disgraced healer," someone muttered. "The commander's pet Omega," another added. Thorn's growl silenced them, but Lyra touched his arm. "Let them talk. We have bigger concerns." They were heading to the king's private study, where the royal archives held records of the queen's final days. Archives Lyra had been forbidden to access after her banishment. "His Majesty is still in mourning," the guard at the door warned. "He may not be receptive." "He'll see us," Thorn said firmly. Inside, King Aldrich stood with his back to them, gazing out at the city below. He'd aged decades in 3 years, his once dark hair now silver, shoulders bent with grief. "So," he said without turning, "the Omega who killed my wife returns." "I didn't." "I know." The quiet words stopped Lyra cold. Aldrich finally faced them, and she gasped at the pain etched into his features. "I've known for some time, but admitting it would mean acknowledging that I failed her, that my pride and alpha superiority cost me everything. Your Majesty," Thorn began, but Aldrich waved him silent. "The Queen begged for Lyra that night, begged me to ignore protocol, to let the Omega healer try first." His voice broke. "But I insisted on tradition, alpha healers for royalty. By the time I relented, the poison had progressed too far," Lyra finished softly. "It was designed that way, to seem like something alpha healing could handle, until it was too late." Aldrich's eyes sharpened. "You know who did this?" "Not who. Not yet." Thorn stepped forward. But we encountered shadow alphas who knew about the poison. They called it their creation, but someone taught them to make it. Someone who understood both alpha and omega healing intimately. The archives, Lyra added. We need to see the healing records from that night. The real ones, not the sanitized version released to the council. The king studied them for a long moment. Then he moved to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a safe. I've read them every night for 3 years, he said, pulling out a slim volume. Looking for answers, finding only questions. Lyra took the journal with trembling hands, her own notes, confiscated after the queen's death. But as she flipped through, she found additions in another hand, marginal notes analyzing her techniques, documenting the poison's progression with clinical detachment. Someone was studying me, she breathed, learning how I healed. Look at the last entry, Aldrich said quietly. Lyra turned to the final page and froze. There, in handwriting she recognized, was a single line. The harmony is broken. Soon, all will be shadow. I know this writing. Her voice came out strangled. It's... The door burst open. Your Majesty, Commander! The healing halls are under attack. They ran. Through corridors Lyra had once walked daily, past rooms where she'd learned her craft. The screams started before they reached the main hall. Inside was chaos. Shadow alphas, dozens of them, swarmed the healing chambers. But these were different, more solid, more controlled. And at their center, hello, little songbird. Lyra's knees nearly buckled. Master Healer Corvus? Her old mentor stood in the center of the carnage, but he was changed. Half his body showed the corruption of a shadow alpha, while the other half remained horrifyingly normal. He smiled, the expression grotesque on his partially transformed face. Surprised? You always were too trusting. He gestured to the cowering healers, both Alpha and Omega. I've spent years studying the divide between our kinds, the artificial barriers that keep us weak. The Queen's death was educational. You killed her, Lyra whispered. I transformed her. Or tried to. She was meant to be the first a perfect fusion of alpha strength and omega grace. But you interfered with your pure healing. His face twisted. No matter. I've perfected the process since then. By becoming a monster? Thorn snarled. By becoming evolution. Corvus raised his hand, and more shadows poured in. Join me, Lyra. Your voice could stabilize the transformation. Together, we could create a new kind of being. No more alphas or omegas, only shadows, perfectly balanced. That's not balance, Lyra said, her voice gaining strength. That's erasure, Corvus sighed. Then you'll serve as another experiment. How much corruption can a healer take before breaking? The shadows surged forward. The battle erupted instantly. Thorn shifted into his wolf form, massive, black as night, with eyes like molten gold. He tore into the shadow alphas with savage precision, but there were too many. Protect the healers! Lyra shouted, rushing toward the apprentices huddled in the corner. Most were young, barely out of training, both Alpha and Omega trembling together in shared terror. Lyra, 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 Corvus tesked, walking calmly through the chaos. Still trying to save everyone, still believing in unity, he gestured, and shadows coiled around her ankles, cold as death. The Queen believed too. Look where it got her. The Queen died because of your poison. Lyra struggled against the shadow bonds. The Queen died because she represented everything wrong with our system. An alpha female ruling through birthright rather than strength, dependent on Omega healers for her health. His corrupted half pulsed with dark energy. I offered her transcendence. She chose death instead. A memory clicked. The Queen's final words, gasped through blood-stained lips. The harmony must not break. She knew, Lyra breathed. She knew what you were trying to do. Clever girl, Corvus approached, his movement a disturbing mix of human gait and shadow flow. She realized too late that I'd been planning this for decades. studying both disciplines, finding the resonance points between alpha and omega energy. The poison was just a catalyst meant to force evolution. Evolution or abomination? Perspective. He reached for her throat, fingers partially solid, partially smoke. Your voice almost ruined everything that night. Such pure omega energy, untainted by the prejudices I've spent years breaking down. But now you've done something even more interesting. His grip tightened, not quite choking but threatening. You harmonized with an alpha, willingly. Do you understand how impossible that should be? Through their nascent bond, Lyra felt Thorn's rage and fear. He fought desperately to reach her, but more shadow alphas kept appearing, overwhelming even his incredible strength. The old texts speak of it, Corvus continued. True pairs. Alpha and Omega so perfectly matched they could share power freely. But the dynasties feared. It feared what united pairs could accomplish. So they created the laws, the segregation, the artificial hierarchies that keep us apart. You're insane. But even as she said it, Lyra remembered her grandmother's stories. Tales of healers who sang with their guardian strength, warriors who fought with their healer's grace. Am I? Look at what you accomplished in the outer district. One song, powered by combined energy, and you purified a dozen shadow alphas. Imagine what you could do with proper training. I won't help you corrupt others. Corrupt? I'm trying to free them. His face contorted with genuine emotion. Do you know what it's like to be a male Omega healer? To have the gift but be considered weak? To watch alpha healers brute force their way through delicate procedures because strength is valued over skill? Lyra's struggles slowed. She'd seen it: tooth prejudice, the waste of potential. Or what about female alphas? Corvus continued. Powerful but considered too emotional to lead? The system is broken, Lyra. I'm simply breaking it faster. By turning people into monsters? By removing the barriers entirely. He released her throat, stepping back. The shadow alpha form is transitional. With your voice to stabilize the process, we could create beings with full access to both aspects. No more weaknesses, no more limitations. Around them, the battle continued. Several healers had been corrupted, their screams echoing as shadow invaded their bodies. But something strange was happening. Some were beginning to stabilize, neither fully shadow nor fully their original selves. You see? Corvus smiled. It's already beginning. The younger generation adapts more easily. Soon, a massive black wolf crashed into him, jaws snapping for his throat. Corvus dissolved into shadow, reforming several feet away. Ah, the commander. Tell me, how does it feel to know your entire military structure is built on a lie? That the alpha dominance you enforce is nothing but systematic oppression? Thorn shifted back, positioning himself between Corvus and Lyra. What you're doing isn't freedom. It's forced conversion. And what is your precious protocol but forced segregation? Corvus countered. At least I offer choice. Join willingly, and the process is painless. Resist. He gestured to a corrupted healer writhing on the floor. That's not choice, Lyra said quietly. That's coercion. Then let me make it simpler. Corvus's form solidified completely, revealing the full horror of his transformation. Help me perfect the process, or watch everyone in this room die. Starting with your alpha. You have 1 minute to decide, Corvus said, shadows coiling around him like living things. Help me willingly, or I'll corrupt your alpha and make you watch him transform. Slowly, Lyra's mind raced. Around them, healers both alpha and omega huddled together, traditional boundaries forgotten in their terror. Some bore the early marks of corruption, dark veins spreading beneath their skin. Don't, Thorn growled low. Whatever he wants is to save our people from centuries of artificial division, Corvus interrupted. Look around you, Commander. When faced with true danger, they huddle together. No alphas, no omegas, just scared healers seeking comfort. That's the truth the dynasties have hidden. Lyra. A small voice drew her attention. An Omega apprentice, barely 16, crawled toward them. Shadow taint spread up her arm, but her eyes remained clear. It doesn't hurt as much when Marcos holds me. Marcos, an Alpha apprentice, cradled her against his chest. Where they touched, the darkness seemed to slow. You see? Corvus's voice held triumph. Natural harmony. The young ones understand instinctively what we've been trained to forget. They're children. Lyra spat. You're experimenting on children. I'm freeing them. No more Omega healers relegated to menial work. No more Alpha healers relying on brute force. They'll have access to both. If they survive the transformation. Thorn cut in. How many have you killed perfecting this process? Corvus's expression darkened. Fewer than the system kills through neglect and prejudice. How many Omega healers die attempting procedures they're not allowed to formally learn? How many Alphas burn out forcing healing that requires finesse, not strength? He had a point, and Lyra hated him for it. She'd seen both during her training Omega healers barred from trauma wards, Alpha healers destroying delicate tissue through sheer force. There has to be another way, she said desperately. There is. Corvus extended his hand. Join me. Your voice can stabilize the transformation. Make it painless. Together, we can create a new order, built on forced evolution and destroyed lives? Lyra shook her head. The Queen understood. That's why she chose death over your vision. The Queen was a fool blinded by tradition. Shadows erupted from Corvus, lashing out at the remaining healers. More screams filled the air as corruption spread. But you're right about one thing she did choose, just as you must choose now. The shadows reached for Thorn. Without thinking, Lyra began to sing. Not the war cry from before, but something older. A lullaby her grandmother used to hum, from the time before separation, when Alphas and Omegas worked as one. The melody was simple, almost childlike, but power thrummed through every note. The shadows recoiled. More surprisingly, the corrupted healer's screaming lessened. The apprentice pair Marcos and the Omega girl began to glow faintly where they touched. Impossible, Corvus breathed. That song was destroyed with the old temples. Nothing is ever truly destroyed, Lyra sang between verses. Only forgotten, hidden, waiting. She felt Thorn's presence at her back, his strength offered freely, not overwhelming her own power but complementing it. Two voices joining in harmony, though he didn't sing aloud. Around them, other healers began to hum along, the melody stirring something deep in their genetic memory. Alpha and Omega voices rose together, uncertain at first, then with growing confidence. Stop. Corvus lashed out, but his shadows met a barrier of combined energy. You don't understand. Without transformation, we'll always be divided. Division isn't the problem. Lyra realized, her voice growing stronger. Forced separation is. We don't need to become shadows to find unity. We just need to remember what we've forgotten. The corruption began to recede from the affected healers. Not violently expelled as before, but gently drawn out as their combined voices created a resonance that Shadow couldn't maintain. No! Corvus's form destabilized, flickering between human and shadow. I've worked too long, sacrificed too much. You sacrificed others? Thorn corrected coldly, starting with the Queen who trusted you. She was necessary. Her death would have proven the system's failure if you hadn't hidden the truth. And now, the truth will be revealed. King Aldrich's voice cut through the chamber. The king stood in the doorway, crown gleaming, eyes hard as stone. All of it. The throne room had never hosted such a diverse gathering. Alpha and Omega healers sat side by side, their traditional separation abandoned after the night's revelations. Noble wolves filled the galleries while human servants stood as witnesses rather than silent attendants. At the center, Corvus knelt in chains, specifically designed to hold shadow-corrupted beings. Master Healer Corvus, King Aldrich's voice carried the weight of personal betrayal. You stand accused of regicide, attempted genocide, and crimes against the natural order. How do you plead? Corvus raised his head, the corrupted half of his face twisting into a smile. I plead revolutionary. Every great change requires sacrifice. You murdered my wife. The king's composure cracked slightly. Your queen, your former student. I offered her evolution. She chose stagnation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. In the witness section, Lyra felt Thorne's hand find hers, a gesture of support that would have been scandalous days ago. Now, after what they'd witnessed, such connections seemed natural. Tell them the truth, Corvus continued, addressing the assembled crowd. Tell them how she begged for the old ways in her final moments. How she spoke of unity while accepting a system that divides us from birth. She spoke of harmony. Lyra stood, her voice carrying clearly. Not the erasure of our natures, but the celebration of our differences working together. Pretty words from the Omega who failed her. I failed because you designed the poison to corrupt Omega healing specifically. You knew the king would insist on alpha healers first, buying time for your weapon to take hold. She stepped forward. But you miscalculated. The queen didn't die cursing the system. She died protecting it from your vision. My vision would have freed us all. Your vision would have enslaved us to shadow. An unexpected voice interjected. The young Omega apprentice from the healing halls stood, supported by Marcos. Where corruption had touched her, faint scars remained, but her eyes were clear. I felt it, Master Corvus. The shadow doesn't unite, it consumes. It takes what makes us unique and replaces it with hunger. Other corrupted healers nodded, sharing similar experiences. The void touch had promised power but delivered only emptiness. Your children, Corvus dismissed. You lack the will to embrace true change. They lack the desperation, Aldrich corrected quietly. Something you cultivated for years, didn't you? Taking the most marginalized healers, the ones hurt worst by our flawed system, and twisting their pain into your weapon. The king rose, descending from his throne with measured steps. I've spent 3 years studying my wife's final writings, hidden in metaphor and code. She documented your experiments, how you targeted healers who'd suffered under the current system, how you used their legitimate grievances to justify monstrous acts. Someone had to act. The system perpetuates suffering, so you created more? Thorne challenged. How many healers died in your experiments before you perfected the shadow corruption? Corvus's silence spoke volumes. 43, Lyra said softly, drawing shocked stares. I found the records in his personal laboratory. 43 healers over 15 years. Started with volunteers who believed in change, ended with unwilling subjects when the voluntary pool dried up. All promised transcendence. All dead. Their sacrifice paved the way. Their murder, Aldrich corrected sharply, fueled your obsession. And my wife would have been 44 if Lyra hadn't intervened, however unsuccessfully. The king turned to address the assembly. For too long, we've allowed artificial divisions to weaken us. Master Corvus exploited those divisions, but he didn't create them. We did, through laws that separate, through traditions that diminish, through pride that blinds us to simple truths. He gestured to where young healers sat together, boundaries forgotten. They show us the way forward, not through forced evolution or shadow corruption, but through choosing connection over separation. Pretty speeches won't change centuries of prejudice, Corvus laughed bitterly. No, Aldrich agreed, but actions might. As my first act of reformation, I hereby dissolve the laws mandating separation between Alpha and Omega healers. Let skill, not designation, determine placement. Let partnership, not dominance, guide healing. The throne room erupted. Some cheered, others protested, but the young healers simply held each other tighter. And as for you, the king returned his attention to Corvus. You'll face trial for your crimes. But first, you'll help us heal those you corrupted. Refuse, and spend eternity in shadow-bound chains. Cooperate, and perhaps find redemption. Redemption? Corvus spat. From a system built on lies? From people willing to build something better? Lyra said quietly. The offer stands, Master. As you once taught me, healing begins with choice. The trial dragged on for days, but Lyra found herself in the palace's highest tower, working alongside healers both Alpha and Omega to reverse the shadow damage. Corvus, bound but cooperative, guided them through the process with bitter efficiency. Gently, he instructed, as she worked on a young beta guard. The shadow bonds to pain. Joy repels it. It was surreal, taking instruction from the man who'd orchestrated so much suffering. Yet his knowledge was invaluable. Each healed victim revealed more about how the corruption worked, and how naturally Alpha and Omega energy complemented each other when not forced apart. You could have done this legally, Lyra said during a break. Petitioned for change, demonstrated the benefits. I tried. Corvus's laugh was hollow. For 10 years I submitted proposals, showed evidence of improved outcomes when healers worked together. The council rejected everything. Too radical, too dangerous, too threatening to the established order. That left me 5 years to find alternative approaches. So you decided to burn it all down? I decided to prove them wrong in a way they couldn't ignore. He gestured to where Thorn worked with an Omega healer, their combined efforts mending what neither could alone. Look at your commander. Weeks ago, he'd have rather died than accept Omega healing. Now he seeks it out. Crisis creates clarity. Crisis creates corpses, Lyra countered. Including the Queen. Something flickered in Corvus's corrupted eye, genuine pain this time. She was my greatest student, brilliant, compassionate, everything a healer should be. When she married Aldrich, I thought, finally, a queen who understood, who could change things from within. But she chose gradual reform over revolution. She chose willful blindness over necessary action. But the venom had left his voice. Did you know she was pregnant when she died? Lyra's hand stilled. What? Early stages. She'd come to me because she wanted both Alpha and Omega healers attending the birth. Wanted to set an example. His chains rattled as he shifted. I saw an opportunity. If the poison worked, she'd become the ultimate symbol of unity. If it failed, you murdered her child too. Thorn's voice cut like ice from the doorway. I miscalculated. The pregnancy made her system more vulnerable. The poison acted faster, more violently. Corvus met Thorn's murderous gaze steadily. My greatest failure and deepest regret. Regret doesn't resurrect the dead, Thorn snarled. But Lyra touched his arm. No, but understanding might prevent future deaths. She studied her former mentor. You speak of the pregnancy making her vulnerable. How? Pregnancy creates natural harmony between mother and child, Alpha or Omega irrelevant. The poison, designed to corrupt single energy signatures, couldn't process the duality. It turned chaotic, aggressive. A thought struck Lyra. Then pregnant healers would be immune? Theoretically. Though testing that would be monstrous. Yes, Lyra's mind raced. But it explains why some corrupted healers stabilized when touching others. Physical connection creates temporary harmony. The shadow can't maintain itself against unified energy. Which is why I needed your voice, Corvus admitted. To force stability where nature resisted. Instead, her voice reminded us what we'd forgotten. King Aldrich entered, looking haggard but determined. The trial concludes tomorrow, Corvus. The evidence is overwhelming, but I offer you one chance at partial redemption. Death or imprisonment. Generous options. Service or shadow. The king's expression remained stone. Help us undo every trace of your corruption. Train healers in the old ways you discovered. Use your knowledge to heal rather than harm. Do this and live. Refuse and become the shadow you worship permanently. You'd trust me near healers again? I'd trust Lyra to keep you leashed. Aldrich glanced at her. If she agrees to oversee your work, Lyra felt the weight of the decision. Working daily with her queen's murderer, her mentor turned monster. But his knowledge could save lives, prevent future corruptions. She thought of the young apprentices, naturally finding harmony. Of the decades of knowledge Corvus possessed, twisted but valuable. One condition, she said finally. He helps establish the new healing academy, Alpha and Omega learning together from the start. No more artificial divisions creating the desperation he exploited. Agreed, the king said immediately. Corvus stared at her, and for the first time since his corruption, something human flickered in his twisted features. You'd trust me with children? I'd trust children to see through your lies better than we did. Lyra met his gaze steadily. And I'd trust the hope of redemption to accomplish what punishment alone cannot. Even for me? Especially for you. Because if someone as fallen as you can choose healing over harm, anyone can. The silence stretched long. Finally, Corvus bowed his head. I accept, though I deserve no mercy. No, Lyra agreed. But perhaps you can earn it. The transition to the new system proved smoother than anyone expected, though not without challenges. 6 months after Corvus's trial, the new Royal Healing Academy buzzed with controlled chaos. Young voices Alpha and Omega Alec arose in harmony as they practiced the rediscovered songs. Where once stark divisions marked the halls, now students mingled freely, their natural affinities guiding partnerships rather than rigid law. Lyra supervised from the observation deck, noting how naturally the young ones adapted. An Alpha girl with unusual delicacy worked alongside an Omega boy whose strength surprised traditionalists. They healed a bird's broken wing together, neither dominant nor submissive, simply synchronized. The council meets again tomorrow, Thorn said, joining her. His official consort insignia caught the light, a new position created to acknowledge their partnership without forcing traditional mate bonds. Lord Blackstone still protests the changes. Let him. The results speak louder than his objections. She gestured to the training floor. Healing rates up 60%. Fatal complications down by half. Even the military acknowledges the improvements. The military acknowledges that wounded soldiers prefer the new methods, Thorn corrected with a slight smile. Amazing how quickly Alphas abandon prejudice when Omega techniques ease their pain better, or when Alpha strength saves Omega lives during traumatic injuries. Lyra leaned into his warmth. Together, always more effective than apart. A commotion below drew their attention. Corvus, heavily bound in restriction chains that allowed movement but prevented shadow manipulation, instructed advanced students. His corruption had been partially reversed enough to restore his mind fully while leaving visible reminders of his crimes. Harmony isn't sameness, he lectured, his voice carrying despite the chains. Alpha energy flows like a river, powerful, direct. Omega energy dances like wind, subtle, pervasive. When you force them together, you create storms. When you let them choose their dance. He gestured to a pair of students. They began to sing, voices weaving together, and light bloomed between their joined hands. A patient's infected wound cleansed itself in moments. He's a good teacher, Lyra admitted reluctantly. He's a constant reminder, Thorn countered, of what happens when pain twists into extremism. Perhaps that's why he's effective. The students see where the path of division ultimately leads. Through shadow and death? Through believing ends justify any means. She watched Corvus correct a student's technique with surprising gentleness. He's different with them. Patient. Like he's trying to give them what he felt he never received. Redemption through teaching? Understanding through connection. The very thing he tried to force through corruption, now happening naturally because we remove the barriers. Below, more students joined the healing song. The academy's great windows vibrated with harmonic resonance as dozens of voices united. Not the regimented chants of old traditions, but organic melody arising from genuine cooperation. "The king wants you to address the assembly," Thorn said quietly. "Share your vision for expansion beyond the capital." "Our vision," she corrected. "I won't stand before nobles and merchants alone. We present as partners or not at all. That will ruffle feathers." "Good!" Ruffled feathers sometimes reveal new patterns of flight. He laughed, the sound still rare enough to make her heart skip. "You've been spending too much time with the philosophy instructors, or perhaps the right amount of time with a commander who's learned to value wisdom over protocol." Their banter was interrupted by urgent footsteps. Marcus appeared, breathing hard. "Commander, healer Lyra riders from the Eastern Territories. They bring news of a plague. Traditional healing fails, but they've heard rumors of our new methods." "How many affected?" Thorn shifted instantly to military efficiency. "Thousands, growing daily. They beg assistance, but fear sending their sick to the capital." Marcus hesitated. The territorial lord still holds to old ways. He forbids Omega healers in the treatment centers. "Then we go to them," Lyra decided. A full delegation, Alpha and Omega healers working together, proving the method's effectiveness where it matters most, saving lives. "The council won't approve. The council will approve," King Aldrich's voice interrupted. The king stood in the doorway, travel clothes replacing royal robes. "Because I'll be joining this delegation. It's time I stopped decreeing change from my throne and demonstrated it in the field." "Your Majesty," Thorn began, "the danger is why I must go. How can I ask others to trust in unity if I hide behind palace walls?" Aldrich's gaze found Corvus below. "Even our greatest failures teach valuable lessons. This plague may be natural, or it may be another's attempt at forced evolution. Either way, we face it together." "All of us?" Lyra asked, understanding the implication. Corvus's knowledge saved 40 lives last month alone. "If this plague bears any resemblance to shadow corruption," the king's expression hardened, "we bring every tool available, including reformed monsters who understand corruption intimately." The delegation was decided. Tomorrow, they would ride toward plague and prejudice alike. 1 year after the Eastern Plague, Lyra stood in the renovated Great Hall, watching the ceremony unfold. No longer divided by invisible lines, Alphas and Omegas mingled freely as the first unified healing graduates received their credentials. "Healer Marcos Winterborn," she called. The young Alpha stepped forward, bearing scars from where shadow corruption had once touched him. Healer Aria Moonwhisper. His Omega partner joined him, their hands naturally finding each other. They'd been the first to fully embrace partner healing, their bond forged in terror and transformed into strength. Now they headed to the northern wastes, bringing unified healing to the most traditional territories. "Hard to believe it's only been 2 years, Thorn murmured beside her. His formal commander attire now bearing the intertwined symbols of Alpha and Omega design that would have been heretical before. "Since I saved your life?" "Since you changed it entirely." His fingers brushed Hursa public gesture that still drew some stares but no longer scandal. "Do you regret the path?" Lyra considered. The Eastern Plague had tested everything: their methods, their unity, their commitment to change. Thousands had lived who would have died under old methods. But the cost. Her gaze found Corvus, seated in the witnesses section. His chains were gone, replaced by monitoring bracelets that tracked any shadow resurgence. He'd proven instrumental in developing the plague cure, working tirelessly beside those he'd once tried to corrupt. The Eastern Territories now hosted 3 unified healing centers, their lord's prejudices crumbling before demonstrated success. "I regret the pain required to get here," she said finally, "but not the destination." "Healer Lyra," a young voice interrupted. An Omega girl, maybe 12, approached nervously. "My village sent me to ask, will you visit?" We want to learn the harmony songs, but the elders say omegas shouldn't sing their power freely? Lyra knelt to the girl's level. Tell your elders that the royal healer herself will come, with her alpha partner and a full teaching delegation. The girl's eyes widened. You're mated to the commander? Partnered, Thorn corrected gently. A new tradition for a new age. Oh, the girl processed this. My friend Tomas is alpha. Could we be partners too? He says my healing feels like sunshine, and his feels like stone, but together you become a mountain touched by dawn, Lyra finished. Yes, child. You and Tomas can learn together. Should learn together. As the girl ran off excitedly, Lyra rose to find Corvus approaching. The crowd gave him space not from fear anymore, but respect tinged with caution. You taught her well, he said simply. The metaphor of mountain and dawn. I remember using it in better days. Your teaching methods survived even if your methods didn't, Lyra acknowledged. The students benefit from your knowledge, properly channeled. Properly leashed, you mean? But there was no bitterness. I've been requested in the southern reaches. Another shadow emergence, though this one seems natural rather than induced. Will you go? With supervision and purpose. Yes. He studied her. You saved more than lives, you know. You saved the ideal-eyed corrupted unity through choice rather than force. We all saved it. Even you in the end. King Aldrich's voice rose over the crowd, beginning the formal acknowledgments. But Lyra's attention caught on a familiar scene, young healers spontaneously harmonizing, their combined voices making the crystal chandeliers sing in resonance. What are you thinking? Thorn asked, noting her distant expression. About fairy tales, she admitted. How they sometimes come true, just not as expected. This isn't a fairy tale. Too much pain, too much reality. No, she agreed, watching Corvus accept his assignment papers with humility that would have been impossible 2 years ago. It's better. Fairy tales end with happily ever after. Real change continues, grows, evolves properly. The ceremony concluded with the traditional healer's blessing, but sung now in harmony, hundreds of voices. Alpha and Omega, young and old, scarred and whole, united in purpose, if not in perfection. Later, as night fell over the capital, Lyra stood on the palace's highest balcony. The city below glowed with lanterns from celebrations in both noble quarters and common districts. Change had come to more than just healing. Ready for tomorrow? Thorn joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand, small domesticity that meant everything. Another village to convince? Another tradition to gently reshape? Another chance to prove unity works? She accepted the tea gratefully, always. In the distance, a nightbird sang alone at first, then joined by another in harmonious counterpoint. Different voices, different strengths, but together creating something neither could achieve alone. The revolution was complete. The real work had just begun.